I'm going to talk about water and cells and life, and and specifically, I'd like to talk about where we get our energy. Uh, and as Stuart mentioned, the ideas that I'm going to present are rather unconventional ideas for sure. So, um, where do we get our energy? And obviously, and especially in Hawaii, there's a lot of good food, and we certainly, without question, get lots of energy from food. And I'm going to raise the question whether we also get energy from light. Um, uh, Now, when you think of light, at first, my goodness, light? That's kind of weird that we get energy from light. But as you know, nature commonly uses light to supply energy, and you may start with green algae, which undergo photosynthesis. Some bacteria do that as well. These are lovely pictures. I show them because of their aesthetic beauty mainly, but mostly we're familiar with green plants. And so what are those about the green plants? Well, you know, we get rain, and the roots of the plants take up the water and take up the water into the green leaves, and the green leaves receive sunshine. And what happens in step one in the photosynthetic process? Step one is that the water that's inside the leaves of the plant get split into a positive and a negative moiety. Uh, and then the plant goes on to use that split water. The process of photosynthesis is about, I think, some 20 steps or so, many of which are not understood. But step one is the splitting of water this way. And what I'm going to be presenting to you is that this actually happens more generically than in green plants. So question is, do we get some energy, any energy from light? And obviously, I'm not going to suggest that we photosynthesize, but I am going to suggest that nature has not forsaken the use of light. You know, if you think about Mother Nature, starting with unicellular organisms, building up to green plants, and using photosynthesis in a very effective way. And one day nature decides, well, okay, Mother Nature, I want to invent animals. And animals can forage, but the question is, you know, having such a well-developed, useful mechanism of getting energy from light. When you invent animals, would you abandon this mechanism, or would you maybe keep it in reserve, use it to complement what we get from food? And that's what I want to address. So it starts with the water molecule. I think everybody in this audience is familiar with the water molecule, oxygen and two hydrogens. And what happens is what we found is that the water molecule gets split, pretty much like first step in photosynthesis. It gets split, and when it gets split into a positive entity, the positive charge from the hydrogen, and a negative charge because you got two from the oxygen and one from the hydrogen. So you've got plus and minus. And what we discovered is the following. If you start with water, this is water, you put water next to a material, and we're talking about hydrophilic, water-loving materials, most of them, not everyone. What happens is that the water gets transformed into two parts with charges separated. The negative charge in this region, remember we split the water, and the positive charge here. And we call this region, this negatively charged water, we call this the fourth phase, or EZ water. And there's a whole list of pieces of evidence to support that, which obviously I don't have time to go over in the time that Stuart has allotted me. So you got negative charge here, And you've got the positive charge sitting in what we call bulk water. So this is easy water, fourth phase water, and this is bulk water. And that separation of charge, of course, is potential energy, right? Just like a battery. And it's a battery in water. And indeed, well, okay. So we wanted to figure out about what energy is responsible. If you want to separate charge like a battery, like your cell phone battery, for example, you need to plug it in. You need energy, and of course, the same is true with water. If you want to separate charge in this way, you need to put in energy. And we found a young undergraduate student in the lab found that light was responsible. And here's the experiment that he did. This is actually a real experiment, real data, among the first that we got. And obviously this is drawn by my son, the artist. So this is a hydrophilic material of some sort sitting next to water. And you put little particles, we call them, we use microspheres, little tiny spheres. And what happens is after a period of time, maybe 5 minutes or so, there's a region here, the EZ region, and or fourth phase region, that's like a crystal, a liquid crystal, and it pushes out these microspheres. And typically what happens is that the boundary between the edge of the EZ and the bulk water containing microspheres is straight. It's parallel to the surface. But one day the student called me in to the lab, and sitting next to him was a gooseneck lamp. And he was shining the lamp at the preparation, and he called me in and said, "Hey, look what I found." And it was pretty exciting because we saw that when he was illuminating with light, the exclusion zone expanded. And I suggested to him, well, take away the light, see what happens. And what happened is it reverted back to the original. So it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that, well, photons are coming from the lamp and building the EZ. So maybe photons, light, is somehow responsible for all the buildup of EZ, including right here. And we did serious experiments after the student made this really interesting discovery. And we found that among all the wavelengths of light that we could test, ranging from the ultraviolet at the short wavelength end through visible and to the infrared, we found the infrared was by far the most powerful, maybe like 1,000 times more powerful than visible light. A lot of people don't really know where infrared light comes from. They think of a toaster or something getting hot and generating infrared light, but actually infrared is all over the place, especially Hawaii. And you can't get rid of it, it takes extreme measures to get rid of it. So it's something like this: everything is generating infrared energy. It's all over the place. So because it's all over the place, it means that if you got the hydrophilic material next to water, because the energy is all around, you're always going to have some amount of EZ water. And if you add more infrared energy, what happens is that the EZ grows. And we've demonstrated this. It can grow in our experiments up to 10 times. And if you take away the extra, then it reverts back to the default position. So it turns out that it's possible to use it to practically extract energy from this. And so you have a situation that looks like this with EZ water, negatively charged, bulk water, positively charged. You put 2 electrodes in and you should be able to get electrical energy just the same way that you get electrical energy from a battery. And indeed, we can demonstrate this. These are, I think, a dozen or so little cells. Each cell has water and some surface and 2 electrodes built in. And this is a switch. And here's a magnifier behind which is a light emitting diode, LED. And the video shows what happens. turn it, and voila, it works. And of course, we're now trying to make this something practical. And as some of you know, some of you have heard of the so-called valley of death between what you can see in the laboratory, which is what I've shown you here, and something for practical use. So it's not trivial to bring it across that valley of death. But now turning to the cell, so what's going on inside the cell? Well, you've got solids and water inside the cell. And these solids are mostly proteins, some nucleic acids and others. And the surfaces of these are, for the most part, hydrophilic. And therefore, the water that's surrounding these surfaces should be negatively charged EZ water. But you'll notice that the cell doesn't look like a real cell because real cells are crowded to the extreme. And this is an underestimate of the crowdedness. If you look at an electron micrograph, you can see it right away. There's practically no space for water, which means essentially that all water inside the cell, or essentially all water, is near one of these surfaces, which means it should be EZ water. In fact, some people, various groups, have calculated how much space there is between solids. And it turns out among the different groups, the calculations, the results are rather similar. It's something like 7 water molecules span between surfaces. So they're really packed, which means that inside the cell, it's essentially all EZ water. And in fact, some of you are aware that if you stick an electrode inside the cell, you get a negative electrical potential. And the general concept as to why you get that electrical potential is because of gadgetry in the cell membrane. And I've argued that that's not true. I have published a paper 6 or 7 years ago on that, and that the reason for the negative charge is that the water inside the cell, the EZ water, is negatively charged. That has implications, but I don't have time to talk about that aspect. But here's the real deal. So you've got the inside of the cell packed with negative charges, and you know that negative charges repel. And if they repel, they want to get away from each other as much as possible. And that essentially is potential energy. So the cell has got potential energy, which, you know, you'd guess would get used. And it does get used. It gets used for protein folding. So, you know, when the cell moves into action, the action is accomplished by the folding of proteins, you know, from one state to another state. So for example, if this is a muscle cell, we spent a few decades working on muscles. If this is a muscle cell, the muscle is first relaxed, then it gets activated. And when it gets activated, the proteins, myosin, actin, and some other minor proteins undergo changes, and so does the water. And that's how the cell undergoes this action. And then it reverts back to the original relaxed situation where the water is ordered. So essentially, when the cell is in the relaxed state, this is a protein, and the water that surrounds it is the EZ water. And so when the cell is activated, what happens is the water melts into ordinary water, and the protein undergoes its folding. And after the action of the cell has terminated, then the cell wants to go back to its initial condition, and it does. And as it does, the EZ water builds up again. That's the energy requiring process. So it goes through a cycle. That's with the EZ, that's the ordinary normal state. On the other hand, in the case where you don't have EZ, or EZ water is deficient, then the cell can't undergo, the cell, you might say, is impotent because it's unable to undergo its action. And all of this is actually described in a book I wrote in 2001. It's got a pretty cover, Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life. And the book received mixed reviews. Some loved it, others hated it. But you see, the discerning people know that this is really a book that is to be devoured. In fact, this is a year later, still reading the book. No children's book for this discerning reader. So obviously it's something that is important to read. Anyway, this book describes what I was just talking about the ordered water and the melting of the water and the folding of the proteins to give rise to cellular action. So returning to reality, the potential energy from the EZ that's in here is driving work, right? And so if you go through the process step by step, we got light that builds EZ, mostly infrared light, building EZ, which builds negative charge, which gives you potential energy. Now that energy, that potential energy is used for work or folding. And if you connect the dots, basically light energy is creating work or protein folding. And so when we ask the question, where do we get our energy? Of course, we get energy from food, but also there's a possibility that we get energy from light, especially infrared light, which is absorbed by the water, which builds EZ and gives us energy. Should this matter to you? Well, yeah, I would think so, because light matters and water matters. And so what you might want to know, if you follow along the story for your own health, is what is it that builds EZ water in your cells? Because this EZ water is critical for everything that happens inside your cells. And I'm gonna present a list of 6 of these, and these 6 are expedients that I think are widely applicable to preserving and enhancing your health. The first is water, obviously. You know, it's the raw material for building EZ water. You need this EZ water for function, and therefore you gotta drink enough of this stuff to make sure you're not dehydrated. Green juicing, I think some of you know about this. You know, you go to your yard, you take some fresh green leaves from some of the plants and you squeeze the hell out of them, get the water, and so it's the plant cell water. And this water is the water from inside, some outside, but basically inside the cells of the plant. And this water in fresh plant cells, just like fresh animal cells, is full of EZ water. So you're actually drinking EZ water, bypassing this buildup step. And I think that's the reason why many health practitioners have told me that their patients come in and they're suffering from one or another various maladies, and they drink this water, and they come back a few months later, and whatever was ailing them has improved greatly. And they've also lost weight for some reason. Anyway, green juicing can be very effective. From the Ayurvedic tradition, thousands of years ago, there's certain foods or herbs, spices that are known to be good for health. And they include a turmeric, coconut water, highly applicable in Hawaii, basil, the so-called holy basil, ghee, and such. We tested many of these. In one paper, we reported 6 of them, and then later another. We found that every single one of them built EZ water. And so since the cells need EZ water for proper function, if you take any one of these and, you know, a reasonable quantity, the result should be the buildup of EZ water. And we think, therefore, that it's the buildup or the return of EZ water to its natural amount, condition, state, whatever, that's responsible for the improvement in health. A simple expedient that even I myself use, sunshine. So where I live in Seattle, the sun doesn't shine a whole lot in the wintertime. It's just beginning to emerge today. But when the sun comes out, people feel happy. They feel good. And, why is that? Well, of course, there's this psychological issue. It's dark and suddenly it becomes light, and we feel good about that. But it's also possible that that the light from the sun is building easy water. About 50% of the light from the sun is in the infrared range. That's the warmth that we feel. And we know that infrared builds easy experimentally. And so it's imaginable that when the sun comes out and penetrates your skull, some of which does, gets to your brain, builds easy water, and your brain then returns to its normal, ordinary state, which is a state of feeling good. That's the default state. And so it's a possibility. So as many people know, go out in the sun. It instills health. And an extreme of that is the sauna. When you go into one of these, what is that? Well, you can imagine it's heat, right? It's sometimes dry heat or moist heat, but it's heat. And heat is essentially the same as infrared. So when you go into one of these, you receive a lot of infrared energy, infrared light, and that builds EZ. So if you go in tired, exhausted, depressed, muscle aches, whatever, often, as I've experienced myself, you come out feeling a whole lot better and fresh. And I think a possible reason is because of the huge amount of infrared light, which builds EZ all over your body, and therefore removes dysfunction and turns it into function. And the last one I want to mention, there are some more, is grounding, or so-called earthing. And it's been demonstrated now in many studies that if you connect yourself electrically to the earth, you feel better, you sleep better, your pains begin to disappear, and overall, what's going on? There are many theories about this. And of course, I have my own. It's sort of like if the only tool you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But the Earth, in fact, is not neutral. The Earth is negatively charged. And I myself, starting in electrical engineering, never, ever learned such a thing. Apparently, it's not taught in the US for whatever reason. But the evidence is overwhelmingly clear. It's taught in Russia, for example, where I first learned of it from a Russian guy working in my laboratory who told me that the Earth was negatively charged. And I said, Andre, you're crazy. I never heard of such a thing. Wouldn't some of my professors, as I studied, have told me this? And nobody indicated to me anything beyond that, if you stick the plug in the receptacle, that third prong is connected to neutrality. But I learned differently. And if anybody has interest, a good summary can be found in the lectures of the great physicist Richard Feynman. That's how he lists the evidence for the negative charge of the Earth and the electric field, not magnetic, electric field that builds. Anyway, the Earth is clearly negatively charged, although many of us don't know about it. And we found experimentally, if you take some water and you put negative charge into it, it builds EZ. So if you connect your body to the negative Earth in any of a number of ways, you can walk on the beach, immerse yourself in a mud bath, or connect yourself through some gadgetry that people have devised, which includes a rod that's stuck in the earth, connected electrically to a plate on which you put your feet. You feel better. And I think the reason is simply, as I said, that you're building EZ in your body, and the EZ is important for function. So these are a half dozen different expedients that I think are really simple, relatively simple, that could benefit your health. So I'm not suggesting that we photosynthesize, but step one is exactly what we found, the splitting of water into the negative and positive. And, uh, um, and all of this and a whole lot more can be found in my more recent book, The Fourth Phase of Water. Anybody interested in taking a look can check on Amazon. The book has become popular. So